Let's take a quick look at how people forget what they learned. About 130 years ago, a German psychologist named Hermann Ebbinghaus discovered what's been called the forgetting curve. Ebbinghaus memorized a series of nonsense syllables and tested his memory on them at various periods ranging from 20 minutes to 31 days. The results shocked him. Ebbinghaus found that there is a tremendous loss of memory in a very short period of time. This illustrates the forgetting curve graphically. Upon immediate recall, you have about 100% retention. That's pretty obvious. But as time goes on, very quickly, what you remember starts dropping dramatically. 20 minutes after you learn something, you only remember 60% of that information. 1 hour later, you've forgotten half of it. 9 hours later, now you're remembering about 35%. This continues on until 1 month later, you remember about 21% overall. Surely this has tremendous implications, not only for educational theory and learning theory, but for your study habits. Interestingly, most people have the same basic forgetting rate. So let's look at two factors that can affect your memory retention. And like I said, this can have tremendous implication for your study habits. These are ways that you can increase your retention. The first is a simple repetition. Immediate review, 1 day later, for example, significantly increases retention. Subsequent reviews continue increasing retention. And as time goes on, you need less frequent reviews to retain even more material. Here's a curve of forgetting, looking at immediate to 3 months later. And it follows a similar pattern. After 3 months, you barely remembered anything of that you learned. But if you review materials 1 day later, look what's happened to the curve. It's shifted out to the right. So now, if you were to look at a time period, such as 1 week, earlier you remembered only 20% or so of what you learned. Now you're remembering over 40%. Then if you review material 1 day later and then 1 week later, the curve shifts even more out to the right. So now, after 1 week, instead of remembering 20% with no review, you're remembering a good 65-70% overall. The second factor which affects memory retention is how meaningful is the information that you learned. If you learn something and it's important to you, you can connect with it, and you already know some things related to it, your memory retention will be very high. On the other hand, if you learn something and it's not important to you, and you do not connect it with anything you already know, you'll have poor retention and require regular repetition. So, in summary, or a review, there's two things that you can do to make remembering much more efficient. The first is to review what it is you learned. And the second is to make what you learned more meaningful to you. Connect it with what you know, what you're interested in, or what you care about. In this class, we're going to try to do both of these things, and let's see if it increases your overall learning.